travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Burning questions.
Insightful answers.
Listener's choice.
With Clement Manyathela.
So, on our Listener's Choice feature today, so if you are listening to Listener's Choice for the first time, this is a feature. It's been running for all the 5 years we've been here. It's an opportunity we give you as a listener of the show, a friend of the show, to suggest what we should talk about, because most of the time we talk about stuff that we discuss with the producer. So this is an opportunity for you to suggest for us what to discuss, and anything goes. It could be any topic, whatever you feel that maybe we haven't sufficiently dealt with, or a topic you think we must do part 2 conversation on, or maybe a completely new thing, or something you want to understand more. Just write to me on cm@702.co.za, and then we'll bring in the relevant guests or experts to take us through that conversation. Today, we are talking about what international law says about countries having nuclear weapons. And we're doing this because one of our listeners asked that we bring in an expert who can explain this, because they're a little bit confused about it. And I've been saying that there seems to be there are double standards out there about who can have nukes and who shouldn't have nukes. So the escalating tension between Israel and Iran obviously has sparked concern about how this conflict could escalate, especially with all the conversations about nuclear weapons being thrown into the mix. So who is actually allowed to have nuclear weapons? And what does international law say about this? And why do some countries seem to get a free pass while others face massive pressure and even war threats? I know as South Africans, we gave up our nuclear weapons decades ago, but questions about how nuclear weapons are handled worldwide remain a big concern for all of us, including even us as South Africa, who gave up our nukes. So one of the things I want us to touch on also is just the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. What does it say, and which countries are bound by it? If you've got your own questions about this, please feel free to call us or send us a WhatsApp voice note. 011-883-0702 is the number you can dial to call, or send a message or a voice note on 072-702-1702. Hennie Strydom is a professor of international law at the University of Johannesburg, who will be guiding us through this conversation. How are you doing, Hennie? Prof, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I'm fine. I hope you as well, and good morning to the listeners as well.
All right. Yeah, Prof, thank you so much for that. So let's maybe just start with the basics and look at what the law actually says. What does international law say about countries having nuclear weapons? What's allowed, what's not allowed according to the law?
Yeah, I'm going to try and keep it simple because it's a rather complex issue, and you correctly referred to the treaty, the Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968. Now, when that treaty was adopted, at that point in time, the nuclear states, as they used to be called, were Russia, China, UK, France, and the United States of America. And you will immediately note, and some of the listeners as well, that these are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. So all 5 of them possessed nuclear weapons at the time. So the idea with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, was to freeze that moment and that situation, and to prevent any further development of nuclear weapons. So that was his main purpose, and that's why it is called the Non-Proliferation Treaty, because it wanted to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So, and the consequence of having frozen this situation meant that the 5 permanent members who had nuclear weapons at the time could keep them. And no other state could develop nuclear weapons. As a sort of quid pro quo for this position, this preferred position of the Permanent Five, was that they were then, and they were all signatories of the NPT, under an obligation or a commitment to assist other states to develop nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Okay, so that is the position that we have under the NPT. And I may also mention that 191 states have become members of the NPT in the meantime since 1968. So it's a very large number. It's 191 out of the 194 states of the world are members of it. But there are members who have not joined and who have developed nuclear weapons in the meantime. One is Israel, Pakistan, and India. So you have, and of course North Korea, which we know quite frequently tests ballistic missiles, which could be loaded with nuclear heads. So those are the states who have developed and possess nuclear weapons, and they fall outside the NPT. Now, what is the position with Iran? Iran is a member of NPT.
We'll get to that, Prof. We'll get to that. Sorry, I think you said some really important things, so I want to make sure that we're not lost. So the five permanent members in the Security Council, you said it's the UK, USA, China, Russia, and
United States and France.
And France. Okay, so those are the ones who had the nuclear weapons. And the whole idea was you guys can keep them, and the rest of the guys you're not allowed to. You can only do that for peaceful purposes. What does that mean, though, for peaceful purposes? And how do we then gauge that you or that country is developing that for peaceful purposes? And I'm asking that because part of what has been the concern, for instance, with Iran, was that there were concerns about how they were expanding rapidly. I think at some point it was 60% enrichment, and the question was, 60% is far beyond what you need for peaceful nuclear energy. So then that became a concern for the International Atomic Energy Agency. So what do we mean then by peaceful concern, and how do we measure that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that is what the whole idea was with the NPT, is that if you want to make use of nuclear or have nuclear facilities that want to enrich uranium, you can only do that for your energy needs. And there is a global body, international body, which is inspecting your facilities in this regard. It's the International Atomic Energy Agency. So, and states who want to do that have what they call safeguards agreements with the Atomic Energy Agency. And that agency is frequently they're sending scientists into a country and inspecting your facilities to see that what you are doing remain within the objective of peaceful nuclear energy. And we know that Iran is under scrutiny by that same body. And you are quite correct in saying that recently that body has determined that what Iran has done, and it has, as you quite correctly said, its enrichment program has gone far beyond what its domestic needs are concerning nuclear energy. And to that we have to add that Iran is one of the largest producers of natural gas and oil. So the question, why does it need that amount of uranium enrichment processes to be still further developed? That is the occasion, and I think that is the concern that we're having here. Okay,
so for countries like Israel, you mentioned Pakistan and India as well, when they started developing nuclear, did they have to then somehow interact with the IAEA? Or because I know with Israel, I mean, they can say, it's almost like they've taken a position of ambiguity. Many times I've seen interviews where the Israeli Prime Minister is asked, do you have nuclear weapons or not? And he doesn't want to say. So it's almost like they want to keep you guessing. But if they've done it, what is the role then of the IAEA?
Well, those states voluntarily could have concluded safeguard agreements with the IAEA. But, I mean, Israel hasn't done so. And Israel is not under inspection. So, and that is the other problem that we're having, because we do not know at this point in time what are the stockpiles, the nuclear stockpiles Iran has, and I think the same applies to other countries like India, Pakistan, and North Korea. I must just mention North Korea was part of the NPT, but a few years ago it withdrew from it because of the Security Council resolutions condemning its anti-ballistic missile processes and its development of atomic weapons. So it decided then to withdraw. So it is outside that paradigm, like the other countries. And those are the sort of problematic states that we're having, because they are not under scrutiny and we do not know what they are doing. But I must say that apart from North Korea, none of the others have threatened to attack other states with their nuclear weapons. So they seem to be refraining from that. They have other kinds of conflicts that they are pursuing, but not with nuclear weapons.
Okay. So the first 5 countries, the big 5 that you mentioned, who have nuclear and they've been told, okay, you can keep that, and then the rest, let's sign this agreement. Are those being monitored? Are they being inspected? Your UK, USA, China, Russia, France?
Yeah, they are inspected.
Okay.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
So they fall under that safeguard agreements. And I just have to mention something else, a bigger picture. The NPT is, in a sense, part of the disarmament project of the United Nations. And we have recently a new treaty banning nuclear weapons. So progressively. So that treaty is in place, and well, I don't think it has a lot of signatories at this point in time. Maybe from states who do not have, nuclear weapons, and that is the majority of states in the world. But that treaty has as its aim and objective to, over time, build down the nuclear arsenals that we have. Now, how successful that is going to be is anybody's guess at this point in time, and we will see how this is going to be, complied with in the course of time. I just have to mention, you mentioned another important aspect in this, South Africa, who voluntarily dismantled these nuclear facilities, nuclear weapon facilities, and there are other states as well. Kazakhstan, Belarus, Ukraine also did it. And apart from that, we have nuclear-free zones in the world. Africa is another one, is one of them, through the Treaty of Pelindaba. In some Asian countries have collectively decided to create a nuclear-free zone, and states in South America. So it shows you that there is, I think the majority of states these days who don't want to have these weapons and don't want to be exposed to their potential use.
Got it. It's 21 minutes after 11 o'clock. Prof, I'm going to take a quick ad break. I think I see some questions coming through from some of our listeners about what the international law says about nuclear, but also just general questions about nuclear weapons as well. So we'll take those after this.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Burning questions.
Insightful answers
Listener's choice.
with Clement Manyathela.
It's 24 minutes after 11 o'clock. I'm really enjoying this chat with Professor Hennie Strydom, who's a professor of international law at the University of Johannesburg, because I'm learning a lot myself about nuclear weapons and what the limitations are with the law, what international law says. And I see some of your questions that are coming through. Let's get straight to them.
Hi, Clement, Ngoni Randberg here. There's those nuclear treaties, they are just meant, they were put in place by those that already had the nuclear weapons to stop other countries from having nuclear weapons. More like you having a gun and then saying your neighbors or other people in the street should not own a gun. that's the same thing. But those that have the gun now, they don't want to get rid of the gun, but they are saying others should not get it.
How's it, guys? Simple question. What defines a nuclear weapon?
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. Professor Strydom, what defines a nuclear weapon?
Well, if it has an explosive capability, a nuclear explosive carries a nuclear explosive capability, like we have seen on that was dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima after towards the end of the Second World War. So I'm not a scientist and I can't explain to you what are the ingredients, but that in simple terms is what it is.
Okay. Another question is, Clement, please can you ask the Prof, in the context of this Israel-Iran war, how does international law then apply, especially since Iran, there hasn't been evidence even from U.S. intelligence and from the IAEA that Iran has taken a decision to weaponize its nuclear. So what then becomes the basis of this conflict?
Sorry, is that your question?
Yes, this is a question from John.
Okay. It's a very important one. Let me be clear about it. Both the attack by Israel and by the United States cannot be justified under the self-defense rule in terms of the UN Charter, because there was no immediate or existential threat faced by either the United States of America or Israel. So on that score, it constitutes a violation of the UN Charter under the self-defense rule. So even if we assume that that Iran was in the process of developing a nuclear weapon, and that could have constituted a threat against Israel, it does not qualify either, because the threat, in order to justifiably act in self-defense, there must be an immediate threat, and this is not the case here.
What would qualify though as a threat? Because, and you're right in that, because even American intelligence themselves, they've said they didn't have, the intelligence director said there is no evidence that Iran has decided to weaponize its nuclear. Even the IAEA said, yes, we've been inspecting there in Iran and we don't have any credible evidence that they decided to weaponize. So what would be seen as a threat? Because what I've seen the politicians in Israel and America use is that, but Iran has been chanting death to America, death to Israel. So it's almost like they're using that as a basis.
Yeah, that is only part of it. If that language is used, it can be part of the threat to determine where there's a real threat. And if the weapon has already been manufactured and is ready to be launched. So those are the kinds of facts that will indicate how imminent and how existential the threat is. So, but we're not at that point. This is a premature attack to prevent any further development that Iran might be considered at this point in time. Okay.
Another question is, what kind of nuclear did South Africa have? Was it a bomb or was it just nuclear for power purposes?
No. We had 5 nuclear bombs, if I remember that, whether that was the number. And they were all destroyed under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Okay, I see. And then someone else says, hi, Clement, so the superpowers are okay to keep theirs, makes them more powerful, though. What are the repercussions if they do decide to use nuclear?
Yeah, listen, that is, okay, that is also an important question. There is another important piece of information that I need to refer to answer your question. In 1996, if I remember the date correctly, the International Court of Justice was asked to give an advisory opinion on whether there are any circumstances under which a state might be justified to use a nuclear weapon. And there's a lot of issues. There are, Geneva Conventions with disproportionate consequences and all that come into play. But eventually, the court reached the following conclusion. It said that under the current development of international law, if a state's very existence is under threat, meaning that it might be obliterated completely. Under those circumstances, it may be entitled to use a nuclear weapon to defend itself, but not in other instances.
Or to defend itself.
Yeah.
That's a key word. Okay.
Yeah.
So the IAEA, so what about countries that, like you mentioned, like Israel, North Korea, you mentioned Pakistan, India as well. Are there countries here that are not really telling us whether or not they have nuclear weapons? What risk does that raise? Because if they're not even going to allow the IAEA to come and do inspections, then you're left in limbo. You're just wondering whether a country has these powerful weapons or not. And I mean, that's still not safe, especially if it's a country that continuously engages in war.
Yeah, of course, that creates a risk, especially for the neighboring countries, because I do not know how they will be affected if there is some kind of a nuclear conflict.
Yeah.
And if you do not know, how big that arsenal is and what its capabilities are, then you are totally left in the dark, and it creates uncertainty. I mean, that's exactly the reason why you have two adjacent countries, Pakistan and India, who frequently have some kind of border issues and armed conflict situations of a lesser level, of course. But that's why if the one developed, which has happened, then the other one will also develop nuclear capabilities because they feel threatened.
Yeah. So didn't Iran at some point, I don't know, was it Iran that called for a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East? What happened to that?
I think so. That was not taken further, and there was no agreement, as far as I can remember, that enforceable agreement to bring that into effect.
Yeah.
It's actually because of these, threats and the uncertainty around them that we have nuclear-free zones, the ones that I just mentioned a while ago. So, and one would see that that sort of development is expanded further. So, the idea is that we should, and I hope we will, reach a point in the future where we have no state has it.
Yeah, I hope so too. Professor Hennie Strydom, thank you so much for your insights. He's a professor of international law at the University of Johannesburg.